Hi everyone, we're the dev team behind Ninja Brawl. I'm Tyler, the lead programmer of the team.
I'm Jared, I am the head artist of the team.
And I'm Shawn, I'm the main stage designer.
So for the inspiration of our game, we decided to go with a brawler style game, and we wanted to bring some aspects from games that are already there, but with those games we also found some flaws. One of the games we found inspiration from was Smash Bros. And one of the problems that we had with Smash Bros. Was that you can literally hide in the corner until someone gets knocked out completely, and then you can just go in for the kill when they have high percentage damage. And another inspiration we got from another game was PlayStation's All-Star Battle Royale. With that, it was, instead of not being able to destroy your opponent with your best powers, we decided to go with a health bar, and you would have to engage, and you wouldn't be forced to engage the game, unlike PlayStation Battle Royale, but you would still have to engage in the game in order to win. For the character, I decided to go with the ninja character, player 1 as our default character, who is red. We decided to go with ninjas because ninjas are really cool, and I think that fighting ninjas is a concept that hasn't really been created yet, and it is a really fun thing to play with when you actually get to play the video game that we created. As for player 2, player 3, and player 4, we decided to go with the blue player 2, yellow player 3, and green player 4 style to match up with the consistency of other video games that use 1 through 4 player multiplayer gaming.
So with coming up for ideas for the stage design, we wanted to keep with the whole aesthetic we had already going with the ninjas, so we went with the Japanese outdoor aesthetic. And with the area that the ninjas themselves were moving in, we kept it confined because we didn't want the players having too much space to run around in and avoid one another, otherwise it would drag down gameplay. The arrangement of certain platforms, such as the movement up top, it provided more movement options, more of a challenge to navigate, as well as the height of the platforms as well, because we didn't want to keep it all linear and flat, otherwise it would have been relatively boring. With the portals on either side towards the bottom of the stage, it provided more strategy. That way, if you say you were being chased down by an enemy and you wanted to get away, you could jump through a portal, but you would have to be wary of maybe another enemy, or if you wanted to use it to get to another enemy that was running the opposite way of you. Originally, we had the idea for bounce pads, and the moving platform was located at the bottom, but after feedback from other players, people we had testing, they said that it made it kind of cumbersome and difficult to traverse, so we ended up removing them in the final version. And for the character movement, that was kind of worked around the same time as the stage design, so as to better make sure they meshed well with each other and didn't sort of compromise one another. So the characters were given a double jump, so they could jump higher, reach higher platforms, and again, provide more options for movement for either avoiding or chasing down other players, as well as they were also given a dash, so to sort of use as like a method to chase down other players and avoid them, sort of to provide just more strategy and, you know, make the players actually think when chasing down their opponents, and to provide another layer to the game.
So I'm going to focus in on the level blueprint, which includes a lot of code, so I'm going to go ahead and section it off. What you can see here first is the beginning of our camera spawning and HUD. The fixed camera target with blend, that just makes it so it's a fixed camera. And what you can see here is how we make all the characters spawning in based off of player selection. The top range there is for 4 players, the middle is for 3, and the bottom is for 2. And you can see you have an enumeration switch depending on which value that is, which will destroy actors depending on if there's 2, 3, or 4 players, because we simply just get rid of them if they're not being used. This last part will spawn in the HUD, and the reason that there's branches here is so we can remove health bars. We're going to go ahead and move on to combat, which you can see is a bit bulky, so we're just going to focus in on one branch. What this basically is combat for each player individually, which you can see there's 4 main branches that I'm referring to in the video. Each player is able to target the 3 other players, which is why there are 3 branches within those branches. So we zoom in here, we can see the victory conditions, which is a float value, 1, 2, or 3 kills, which gets added on at the end, which I will talk about when we get to that point. The input key, just press, that basically sees who attacked so that we can determine whether or not somebody attacked, and so whether or not we should go through the rest of this code. Since this is all connected to an event tick, this is constantly running just to see whenever it's attacked. And we're going to go ahead and focus on player 1, since It's just the one at the top of the code, and it's a bit isolated, so it'll be easier to understand. We have a for each loop, which will go through and see all the overlapping values with player 1. Player 1 will only overlap with the player if it's within the weapon hitbox, which, as you can see there are comments for, there's 3 branches with comments that say true for player 2, for player 3, and player 4. Those simply determine which player is actually getting damaged. We're only going to focus in on player 2 since all the code is actually the exact same. You can see there that there's add impulse, and with a knockback left and a knockback right value, that will add knockback when the player gets hit in either direction. After that, we subtract health. We decided to go with 4 HP per character. It seemed like a good value to go with. The rest of the code here is pretty much cleaning up after a player is killed, i.e. when they get to 0 health. We set a boolean value to false if they are alive. We have a delay to play the death value. And then we just have their collision box for both their weapon and their character despawn so that they do not become an issue.
So some of the cutbacks we had to do with our project was removing some of the weapons that were planned in the original game. Some of these weapons included polearms, daggers, and bombs. We were originally going to have a selection screen that you can choose your character's weapons and colors, but for the sake of time and the amount of time we had to go with just the player 1, 2, 3, 4 default colors and the one weapon, which was the sword. Another cutback we had to do was not implement a second level. We had a second level completely designed in concept and the functions and how it worked. However, we did not get enough time to fully implement it, and we hope to implement it later on in development.
There were a handful of other obstacles that we had during development that didn't reach the severity of cutbacks like the previous thing that Jared talked about, but a challenge in development that I had was specifically the combat. You had to go through a lot of iterations and a lot of different blueprints that didn't necessarily work. There were issues with animations not playing, with health not being taken away, but the iteration that we currently have works very well compared to other previous iterations we had, and we hope to continue to improve it along the road.
And as far as my challenges go, the biggest challenge was probably nailing down the movement. During times when we would give a sort of demo to the class, a lot of times people mentioned that the characters felt very slow, very floaty. Their run animations took a while to start up. They felt kind of heavy. So I had to go back a couple of times, numerous times, to fix the movement, maybe make them a little bit quicker, a little heavier. They could still jump high enough to reach platforms. Maybe someone was not swinging their sword at like a certain speed or something. So eventually it took a couple of iterations, but eventually we got down to a point where the characters were both quick, easy to control, and fun to use.
For some of my challenges that I came across, it was the sprite sheet, specifically coming up with an idle sheet that specifically flowed really well and looped really well. The original idle I had was really fluctuating in position and it didn't look right, and so going back and changing some of the idle animation flipbook. And another problem I had was the rest of the fluidity with the sprites going from transition to transition, from jumping to landing to swinging the sword, and that was ultimately just visualizing it and having different flipbooks play at the same time and seeing if they flow together, and they ultimately did.
We want to thank everyone for the support, criticisms, and feedback that they gave throughout the whole game development process. We hope you enjoy the current version of the game and all the additional features we have planned for the future.